Flyers win over the dreaded Blue Shirts. They not only beat the Rangers, Pittsburgh loses last night, second place in the Metro for now. My goodness, it's coming up roses for the Orange and Black. Our 97.3 ESPN Insider Kevin Durso at the game last night. Kevin, I was watching on television, and it felt like the building was maybe a little more full and the atmosphere was a little more playoff-esque. What did it feel like to you sitting up high in the press box?
It was a great crowd last night. It was exactly what you would want out of playoff hockey. It was very energized. There were certainly a fair amount of fans who were there for the other side, but that, regardless, a great crowd. And, the Rangers got an early goal, and it kept their fans into the game in the early going. But towards the end of it, as the Flyers just took control of that game in the second and third, it turned into a game where the crowd was just fully behind this team and continues to see what they're capable of as this season hits the stretch run. So I love the atmosphere. It was exactly what I was hoping for. When I was on with Mike yesterday, he asked me something very similar, and I said, you hope that the crowd brings it just like the playoff game, and I thought they delivered. Now,
there are some hockey purists that will say shots are the most overrated stat in hockey, and yet through 20 minutes, 16-8 Flyers, through two periods, 29-18. There's certain times that you can't ignore the shot totals, right?
Yeah, there are. And, I think one of the bigger things about the shot totals is not just how many shots the Flyers are taking as a team. I believe the last three home games that I've been to, the opponent has finished with 28 exactly in all three of them. So it just seems like that number keeps hanging around. That's what they've been averaging. And it just seems like they always seem to find a way to hit that number for the opposition as well. But they really did continue to apply pressure from the start, really. They were the better team in the second half of the first period after getting off to a bit of a slow start. And they bring that shot total up to 16 in the first period. They kept it on in the second period. They had 13 in that second period and finished it off with 11 in the third period as well. So they've just consistently been able to be a team that applies pressure, takes shots, and not just taking shots, but quality shots. Even in a game where he allows 5 goals, I have to think that, Alexander Georgiev had a great game last night, even in allowing 5 goals, because he had to make a ton of high-quality saves. So it's just the way that the Flyers are playing, you're able to take a lot of good shots, and they're creating a lot of those great opportunities for themselves, and that's what's really making a difference.
As I look at your story on our website, 973ESPN.com, and you conveniently do a great job of including the entire box score and all the good stats in a nice, easy, readable format for the PT. I appreciate that. Couturier, for example, his 20th goal. James Van Riemsdyk's right on the edge there at 19. Claude Giroux at 18. Kevin Hayes at 22. I remember seasons of Flyers hockey, and maybe you do as well, where they would proudly boast, that's the 5th guy, that's the 6th guy with 20 goals. And I always would think in those seasons, yeah, that's because they don't really have one star. I mean, they don't have an Ovechkin. They don't have one guy that can just put the puck in the net over and over and over again. And so they have to kind of spin it like, oh, look at all our depth. And then they'd go one and done or not even make the playoffs and be out. This team, though, does feel like the depth is a strength.
It really does. And, I'll tease what I've got coming up on 97.3ESPN.com later this morning, where I follow up on the game and do a little bit of breakdown and things like that. And one of the things I mentioned is how all those guys that you just mentioned are all hovering around the same goal total. You've got Sean Couturier gets his 20th, like you said, and Kevin Hayes' goal at the end that caps the scoring for the Flyers is his 22nd. And sandwiched in the middle, you've got Claude Giroux with the pair of goals that gets him to 19. And you're just seeing a bunch of different guys who are able to contribute. And what I think is really a big thing for this team and their depth and where it is a strength is that it's not just that they've got a bunch of players who are capable of scoring in numbers like that. It's that in the last few games in particular, it's one line that decides that game is going to be theirs to take control of. And I see that from, a couple games ago it was the second line, it was Kevin Hayes, it was Travis Konechny, and Scott Lawton. And then you go to last night, and the top line is the ones who showed up the most and really delivered the big goals at the big time and played really the better all-around game of any of the 4 lines. And it's not to take anything away from the other 3 lines. I thought everybody played a pretty fairly well game, but it was just to see one line who's actually doing the contributing. I asked Sean Couturier a few weeks back, does it make it a little easier? You're not leaned on. It's not a situation where that top line has to be relied on so heavily. And he did point out this is probably the most true depth they've had in several years. So it is a big strength of this team.
Kevin Durso with us, our 97.3 ESPN Flyers Insider. Follow him on Twitter at Kevin_Durso, and you talk about the depth on the team. Well, they added to that depth at the trade deadline, and so now that you've had a, albeit small sample size, what have you seen out of Derek Grant centering the third line, Nate Thompson, no relation, centering the fourth line?
I thought it was very unfair to judge Derek Grant after Tuesday's game. Once we got down to the locker room after the game, we were actually talking to him a little bit. He had taken a red-eye flight in and basically made it into Philly in time to take one morning skate, have that little bit of time to get accustomed to his new surroundings, and had to play a game. So he was not at his best. He wasn't terrible in that game by any stretch, but he wasn't at his best. I thought last night was a much better showing for him, and he really provided some good balance there. He was good in the face-off circle. He was good in his own zone. He got a few scoring chances as well later in the game, and you can see how he's a fit for this team just as much as they wanted him to be. You know, when you go and get a player like that who's able to provide you with some center depth and who can do a lot of those little things, it was a big common theme over the course of last night when I was watching as the game went down the stretch. You know, it was a team that didn't stop making the little plays that you need to make. And Derek Grant's one of those guys who's going to fit in and be able to do those things. I didn't think that this was Nate Thompson's best game by any stretch, but, you don't need it to be when you're on the fourth line. You just need to be able to kind of maintain and match the opposing team's fourth line and eat up some of those minutes that, you can get burned in those minutes if you're not still playing with the right energy and playing with the right fundamentals. So I thought they were fine. It wasn't anything overly impressive, but it wasn't anything that was detrimental to the team either. So both guys have a lot of potential to offer this team in terms of just being able to give them even more added depth and stability at the center position. And I don't see anything changing with that lineup anytime soon, as long as things keep going the way they're going.
Has there been a more pleasant surprise than Aube-Kubel?
I don't think so. I think he's been a really pleasant surprise. And, it was funny because when all the changes were being made with the front office and the coaching staff, he was almost becoming a forgotten part of the organization. He was a former second-round pick who was very much a guy that Ron Hextall liked, but it was really hard to tell where he stood with this new regime. And he's come in and earned every bit of what he's got so far. And it's just been great to see him step up and really be a good all-around player as well. He makes some good, smart plays with the puck, and he's doing things, that shot on the goal by James Van Riemsdyk yesterday is a great example of it. It's nothing that's overly complicated. Throw the puck at the net and pick a spot where you got a shot to get a big rebound, and that's exactly what happened. But he's also stepped up and scored some big goals as well. When the trade deadline passed and the team sent Joel Farabee down to the minors, he took over the spot on the second power play unit and gets a power play goal as a result in the first game he's playing there. So he's had some really big moments, and more than anything, though, I think it's the way that he's able to play away from the puck. He's a really good defensive player. And, I'll go to what Claude Giroux said to me yesterday after the game. They're looking at it as defense breeds offense here. And it's not necessarily going to be for the guy who makes that defensive play. But Aube-Kubel is one of those guys who a good defensive play can lead to something really successful for somebody else at the other end of the ice.
Kevin Durso, our 97.3 ESPN Flyers Insider. Well, you keep saying defense, and I'm looking at the pairings, at least from Daily Faceoff. Last night you had Provy and Niski, Travis Sanheim and Phil Myers, and Robert Haig and Justin Braun. I believe that was the three pairings. What's really funny to me is the website I'm on doesn't have Shane Gostisbehere anywhere. Talk about a forgotten man. He's not even in the injury column. But that leads then to my question of how do you like the three pairings right now? And is Ghost going to have to kind of fight his way back in?
As long as it's, if it's not broke, then don't try to fix it, and it's one of those things where these three pairs have really been together for a good stretch of games now. It's probably going on 2 or 3 weeks where they've played consistently together. I think you have to go back to the New Jersey game where the Flyers lost 5-0 to find when Shane Gostisbehere was last in the lineup. And aside from a small stretch where Justin Braun was out of the lineup with the flu and Mark Friedman had to come up, it's been the same three pairings in that exact order as you read them off. Ghost has been a guy who really has to adjust to this role a little bit. He did have the conditioning stint in the minors and played a couple of games, and everything seemed to go well. But he's not going to enter the lineup as long as everything is going the way it's going. So he's even admitted that he's going to be the biggest cheerleader right now, but it's really hard to see where he's going to slot back in right now, just because things have been going so well, and even down to that third pairing. The third pairing of Justin Braun and Robert Haig has been a great stability pairing. It's you don't need every pairing to be able to be that heavy puck moving and offensive minded pairing, and they've got some of that with Provorov, and they've got some of that with Sanheim and Myers, but they don't need that third pairing to be that. They just need them to be kind of the control unit that locks things down on the back end and makes sure that nothing goes against the team and changes the momentum of a game, and they've been able to do that pretty well. So I like the pairings. It's unfortunate for Gostisbehere that he's kind of stuck in limbo at the moment, but as long as he's on board with where this team is going and with what they're doing, it's not a bad thing to have a guy like that waiting in the wings if you ever need another defenseman.
Yeah, no doubt. Kevin Durso with us. And if you're seeing the players up by you in the press box, getting the soda or getting the candy in the back of the press box there, you see them in the suit, you know they're frustrated, you know they want to play, but only 6 can go, and you keep guys around. Let me ask you this about the games that are left. So there's 18 games left, right down the middle, 9 home, 9 away. What landmines are out there on the schedule, at least in the next few games coming up, that are going to be tough ones for the Philadelphia Flyers?
I probably would start with the very next one against the Rangers on Sunday, just because that's a team that's going to be determined to come back and play better than they did last night. Other than that, I mean, if you move forward, that obviously the standout is that game against Washington. And if so far everything is it's been strange to say, but everything has been breaking the Flyers' way away from their own games. They've been winning their own games, but they've been getting a lot of luck on the other side where everything seems to be going their way. So when Pittsburgh loses in Anaheim last night, Anaheim's one of those teams at the bottom of the Western Conference, just like the Kings were. That's 2 losses by Pittsburgh that allows them to move into second place in the Metro. They're 3 points behind Washington for first place. And if everything swings their way on Sunday, you're looking at a possibility where they'll be 1 point behind Washington, and the 2 teams meet on Wednesday. That could be a game that honestly has implications of deciding who goes into first place. It's crazy to think about, but it really could be that way. The other games that stand out, you got a game back-to-back, not on consecutive days, but they play Boston, Tampa Bay. That's a tough 2-game stretch. And I would also highlight, even if they're not the top teams in the conference or in the league by any stretch, the weekend back-to-back on the road, Dallas and Nashville, is a tough one. Just because the way this team has been on the road, there's a chance that could, it's probably their most extensive travel for the rest of the season. So that one's also one to watch.
Can't wait for it, Kevin. Kevin Durso with us. I appreciate you getting up early and giving us some expert and inside analysis there. And I know Mike Gill and I, and on my show and his show as well, we'll have you on again, bud. Thank you so much.